This is Ben from Last Resort Network, and this is my top 7 albums from the 1970s. There was a lot of change within the music industry in the 1970s. Rock music expanded exponentially, with subgenres like hard rock, heavy metal, progressive rock, glam rock, and art rock cemented and finding varying degrees of success. Electronic music started to gain momentum, championed by bands such as Kraftwerk. By the end of the 70s, genres like New Wave started to gain serious momentum as well. With so many iconic bands and artists from this era, it was very difficult to narrow down my top 7. Ultimately, I picked the 7 albums I feel like have impacted my music listening journey the most and that I return to often. So you know the drill. Don't think of this as an objective list, but please do argue for your favorites in the comments. Two months into 1970, the world was gifted a new innovation in rock music: heavy metal. Black Sabbath's self-titled album is often referred to as the first heavy metal album. Although there may be other albums that you could point to before Black Sabbath, they definitely were the pioneers who made heavy metal popular. For the purpose of this list, I'm going to be referring to the North American release of this album as it's the one widely accessible to me. Incredibly, this album was recorded in a one-day 12-hour studio session. Hailing from Birmingham, the band fits the bleak industrial town from which they are from. Music reviewer Steve Huey pointed this out when talking about the band's heritage. Because there was no definition for their style of music when they burst onto the scene in early 1970, the Boston Globe described their style as hard blues rock. The North American release features only 5 tracks, although it's a little deceptive as it's truly 9 tracks. On 2 of the tracks, 3 songs are packaged together. I think these 6 songs are the strongest on the album. I'm not sure whether they are supposed to be considered individual songs or more like suites, but I think A Bit of Finger, Sleeping Village, and Warning are perfect for each other. It's definitely up there as one of my favorite album closers of all time. I really enjoyed the simple riff on The Wizard as well. Although the next 2 albums are equally as amazing, and they came out within a year of each other. The self-titled album sounds like a band trying to show off everything they've got, which really appeals to me. And here's a question for you. Do you think Black Sabbath's first 3 albums was the best 3-album run of all time? Mark Bolan and his band T-Rex, formerly known as Tyrannosaurus Rex, are probably second only to Bowie himself as the founders of glam rock. Bolan started out as a folksier singer who had an attachment to Middle-earth, but eventually the band would drift to a more flamboyant electric style. Bolan's fashion style became more shimmery and his clothes were shinier, and after the success of singles Ride a White Swan and Hot Love, the band was poised for success. They struck it. Electric Warrior is a perfect example of how music doesn't have to be overly complicated or overly experimental to be impactful. The lyrics on many of the songs are repetitive, but to me this makes the tracks hypnotic. My favorite on the album is probably the opener, Mambo Sun. It's groovy and captivating. Cosmic Dancer, Jeepster, Bang a Gong, and Life's a Gas are amazing as well. You can also get into the expanded edition on Spotify and listen to other great tracks like Raw Ramp and of course Hot Love. Sadly, in 1977, at the young age of 29, Mark Bolan tragically died in a car accident. Though there are many amazing artists to be talked about from the 1970s, I hope many people still remember Bolan and T-Rex. Compared to some of the other artists on this list, King Crimson is more of an acquired taste. The band was one of the pioneers of the progressive rock genre, a genre that emphasizes musical technicality and precision above all else. What I love about Red is that it champions musical precision, yet is so jarring and provocative. The riff in the opening track Red lets the listener know they should not get too comfortable. And once you get to songs like Another Red Nightmare, well, you're just going to have to experience it. The original album contains only 5 songs, the shortest of which is 6 minutes long. Although the extended length of the songs may be more difficult for listeners not used to the genre of prog rock, I promise you that patience pays off. The 12-minute end track, Starless, is on another level, and is my personal favorite King Crimson song. If you already like progressive rock, this is a must-listen. If not, this is a great album to see if this genre is one that you may want to explore more. The Beatles are undoubtedly the most influential band in Western music. John Lennon and Paul McCartney tend to receive the most credit for the band's pioneering, especially in the later years of the band's existence. However, I think George Harrison often goes underappreciated, and All Things Must Pass should show all doubters that Harrison was just as talented as the rest of the group. The album is basically Harrison showcasing everything he was working on over a 2 to 3 year period, and thus it turned out to be a triple LP. Most of the meat of the album is in the first disc, and truthfully, the record has everything it needs in this part. My Sweet Lord, Wah Wah, If Not For You, What Is Life, and I Live For You are all just as strong of songs as any Beatles track, in my opinion. Let It Down is a powerful track in both versions that are shown on the album and showcases Harrison's musical range. Harrison spent time with the Beatles learning the sitar, but All Things Must Pass showed him relearning his love for the guitar. Although I have not listened to all of the post-Beatles solo albums, All Things Must Pass is easily my favorite, although McCartney's Ram and Band on the Run are excellent as well. If you have overlooked Harrison, please check this out. Carole King was almost lost to obscurity. Her talent as a songwriter and composer was apparent and well received in the industry, but it took a lot longer for her to be recognized for her singing talents. In the 1960s, she and her husband at the time, Jerry Goffin, wrote some very successful hits, including The Locomotion, You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman, and Will You Love Me Tomorrow. After pursuing some things with a band that didn't work out, she met James Taylor and Joni Mitchell in the early 70s. This coincided with King pursuing a solo music career. Tapestry was her second album and received instant success. Tapestry front to back is one of the best singer-songwriter albums you'll ever hear. From the free-spirited I Feel the Earth Move to the soft yet strong-willed It's Too Late. King shows she's not only a great composer and songwriter, but a great performer of music. An interesting note is that she featured You've Got a Friend on this album, and around the same time, James Taylor performed You've Got a Friend. His version of that particular song got a lot more success, but that was the beauty of King's music. It could translate across many different singers and songwriters, and she was still willing to share her work with others. This kind of sacrifice ended up working out for her in the long run. Some albums fundamentally change you. Listening to Wish You Were Here was one of those experiences for me. I would highly recommend everyone take an afternoon, get your highest quality headphones, and sit in a dark room listening to this earth-shattering record. As many Pink Floyd albums are, Wish You Were Here is a concept album. Themes of the album center mainly on frustration around the music industry, on songs Welcome to the Machine and Have a Cigar, and the band dealing with Syd Barrett's departure from the band, on the songs Shine On You Crazy Diamond and Wish You Were Here. Barrett left the band in 1968 due to increasingly erratic behavior, but many members felt like he was their main creative force. They felt lost without him. If you want to learn more about Barrett, I'd recommend you listen to his album, The Madcap Laughs. It's really kind of off the rails, and you can tell why he may have had to leave purely based on the music, but it's also very good. Band member David Gilmour also noted that the band had felt they had a lot of work to improve on after Dark Side of the Moon, which is kind of crazy considering how legendary people view that album today. There is a story that Barrett ended up coming to see Pink Floyd on the tour of this album. Apparently Roger Waters didn't even recognize him because of the shape he was in. It shows how heartbreaking this album is. A fundamental piece of the band that made them special, but he was never able to recover and return. Despite this, Pink Floyd made an absolutely legendary 4-album run here with Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, Animals, and The Wall. So maybe Syd Barrett gave them the push they needed to do great things. Of course, I need to list some honorable mentions, especially in this decade. There are so many amazing albums that didn't make my list. Among them, in no particular order, Led Zeppelin's 4 and Physical Graffiti, Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon and Animals, London Calling by The Clash, Talking Heads 77, Horses by Patti Smith, Club de Esquina by Lo Borges and Milton Nascimento, Lola by The Kinks, My Aim Is True by Elvis Costello, Another Green World by Brian Eno, and The Stranger by Billy Joel. The New York music scene in the 1970s was an epicenter of musical innovation. The rise of punk rock happened in New York during this era, and a lot of innovation centered around a specific club, CBGB. Interestingly, CBGB stands for Country Bluegrass Blues. But the bands that became popular, partially through performing regularly at this venue, were not in those genres at all. They were bands like Talking Heads, Blondie, the Patti Smith Group, and of course, Television. Television began a residency at the club in 1974. Brian Eno was actually involved in these early days, but the band found him not guitar-oriented enough and moved on from him. The lineup for Television's debut album, Marquee Moon, was Tom Verlaine as the vocalist and on guitars, guitarist Richard Lloyd, drummer Billy Fica, and bassist Fred Smith. Marquee Moon is often referenced in the conversation of the greatest guitar albums ever. And the reason for this is the dueling guitars of Lloyd and Verlaine, a style inspired by 1960s rock and avant-garde jazz. It also really contrasted the era of punk, which featured a lot of simplified power chords. The album was made with intense rehearsals and preparation, and the results show. From the powerful opening of See No Evil, to the soaring Marquee Moon, to the biting Prove It, Marquee Moon is a blistering experience from start to finish, and holds a special place in my heart as one of my 5 favorite albums of all time. Personally, it also showed me that sometimes you have to be patient with music. I remember Prove It was the first song that I really latched onto from this album. And then sometime a couple years ago, I started listening to the songs See No Evil and Marquee Moon a lot. And pretty soon the whole album clicked for me. The lesson, of course, being never give up on something, even if you don't really understand it the first time you hear it. Well, that's it, folks. Obviously, I want you to let me know what your favorite albums from the 1970s are. There are so many albums that I probably haven't even listened to from this era. This has been Ben from Last Resort Network, your last resort for movies and more.